Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you the Union Telecom Minister, the man who's in charge of the Northeast, an area where we've never seen so much interest and so much development activity taking place as it has over the last few years. Thank you very much, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, for joining us at the GBS. I want to ask you, just before we start, GBS, Global Business Summit. India is on the cusp of doing great things as far as the economy is concerned. We need to move at a faster pace to a higher trajectory to get into an economic superpower status. Jyotiraditya Scindia, you're a young face of the government. How do you see this journey and how do you see the catalyst that your government is actually preparing for to speed up this process?
So, Navika, I think, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's wonderful to be a part of ET's GBS, which is one of the most coveted annual features held in India. On your question, I think India is very much already on its path. The fact that in 2014 we were the 11th largest economy, we are today the 5th largest economy in the world. By 2027, we shall be the 3rd largest economy in the world, going ahead of Germany and Japan as well. We will be a $5 trillion economy by 2028. A $6 trillion economy by 2030. India is on its way, and India is on its way because in the last 10 years, not the incremental change that has come about, but the monumental change that's come about in India. A government led by Prime Minister Modi that has been focused on execution, focused on empowerment, focused on unleashing the power of every single Indian. And today, unlike what it used to be in my growing up years in the 70s and the 80s, where access to capital was really the main issue in terms of growth, today capital has become a commodity. It's new ideas, entrepreneurial capability that is powering individuals, powering companies, and powering nations. And we happen to have a huge amount of power there and potential there. We didn't have a single unicorn in our country 10 years ago. We have 118 unicorns. We have 140,000 startups today. And so much so that you have a government today, as was evinced in this budget, which is targeted close to about 10,000 crores for setting up an FFF, a fund of funds, for the startup ecosystem. And mind you, that money can be leveraged 8x, 10x. So you're actually talking about a corpus of close to 100,000 crores for startups in India. So India is on her way because of the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. You need to create that landscape which has been done in India. The fact that over 10 years, you had 74 airports. Today you have close to 160 airports. You had 90,000 kilometers of national highways. Today you have close to 150,000 kilometers of national highways. The monumental change that this country has seen, today the execution capability in India is way beyond any advanced economy in the world. And that combination of government and the private sector, enterprise and entrepreneurial capability, is unparalleled in the world. And I have all the confidence that our growth rate, and I am not, as an economist, by background, I am not interested in a 10%, 9%, 8% growth rate that remains a blip. The beauty about transformation, Navika, is about CAGR. It's about the compounded annual growth rate. Why the US today has become the world's largest economy is because the US didn't grow at 10% or 15%, but the US grew at 3.5% for 100 years. That's the power of compounding. And that's the power of compounding that today India is experiencing. We have grown over the last 10 years at a 7% CAGR decadal growth rate. And that's the reason why we've been able to lift 25 crore people in India above the poverty line. Our youth dividend. I always say we have a democratic dividend, but we also have a demographic dividend. 70% of India is below the age of 35. That's 98 crore people, 980 million people, 3 times the population of the United States of America, twice the population of combined Europe. That's our capability. And I believe that India will become the center of not only economic growth, but the center of innovation. And it is innovation that powers nations.
Let me ask you, Mr. Scindia, the fact that
Could you and I ever dream that we'll be setting up fabs in India? Today in India, we're not setting up a fab. We're setting up multiple fabs. And fab is the seminal part of growth of new kinds of paradigm innovations in the world. You got a fab being set up in Assam, 40,000 crores. You got a fab being set up in Gujarat. Could we ever dream that Airbus will set up a FAL, a final assembly line in India? You got C-295s now being produced in India, in Vadodara. The Aquarel helicopters are going to be produced in India. We're the second largest market in the world for mobile phones. We're the third largest market in the world for telecom. That's where India is headed today.
You've said in the past, as the telecom minister, that in 4G we followed the world, in 5G we walked with the world, and in 6G you're going to lead the world. Can you take our audiences through the blueprint of what you're planning on 6G?
So just to give you an analogy, if you go back to the US of the 1900s, right? And what the Vanderbilts did and what the JP Morgans did in those days was build out the physical infrastructure. They built out the railroads, they built out the highways. And the Industrial Revolution took off on the basis of that physical infrastructure being built. Today, in modern day, in the global arena, we no longer have a physical highway. We have a digital highway. And that digital carriageway is the most advanced today in India. You know, we built out, and I take my hats off to our TSPs, our telecom service providers, our telcos. We built out the fastest 5G rollout in the world. 22 months, 99% of India's districts, 82% of India's population was covered. The fastest 5G rollout. That digital highway today is doing what? It's transforming India. Because what that digital highway does is that it makes opportunity ubiquitous. It creates a level playing field. It creates inclusivity. It creates equity. So what my farmer can do in Madhya Pradesh or my agarwood grower in Assam or Tripura or my queen pineapple grower in Tripura can do the same thing that what people in Bombay and Delhi and Chennai and Bengaluru and Kolkata can do. It creates a level playing field. And the fact today that you have, because of that, 46% of the world's digital transactions, happening in India. 46%. You're talking about 172 lakh crore. Can you imagine the number of zeros in that? That's the volume, that's the amount of rupees being exchanged digitally in a year in India. 150 lakh crore transactions. That capability is because of the digital highway. But what the Prime Minister thought is that while we create that digital highway, I don't want India to be only a service nation. India must translate into a product nation. And so it was a difficult decision that he took. But when BSNL was moving down the transition from 3G to 4G, the decision was taken that we will move down that transition inventing our own 4G stack. And mind you, people were scoffing at it. Why? Justifiably so. Because there are only 4 countries in the world that have done it successfully. Korea with Samsung, China, Huawei and ZTE, Siemens, Nokia, Finland. Only 4 countries in the world. But he made up his mind that we are going to do it. And so you had the most unthinkable group working together. You had CDOT, a government company, working along with Tejas, a private sector company. CDOT developed the core, Tejas developed the RAN, the radio access network. And then you had an SI, a system integrator, which is also an Indian company, TCS. So you had a complete consortium, Indian consortium, working that out. And within 18 months, we developed our own 4G stack. So we are today the only 5th country in the world to do so. And mind you, that 4G stack is not something sitting in the cupboard. It's being rolled out as we speak. 100,000 sites are being rolled out by BSNL. It's something I monitor on my dashboard, not on a weekly basis. I monitor it on a daily basis. Beginning of day and EOD, end of day. We are rolling out 100,000 sites. We have constructed 75,000 sites as we speak in the last 7 months, of which 60,000 sites have been optimized. We will complete this task latest by June of 100,000 4G sites. Now, converting them from 4G to 5G is not that difficult. You need to put in additional BTS, a little more infrastructure. You can use the same media, the same core, not a problem. And that's going to give us the leapfrog solution for 6G. And what we're doing in 6G, we started with the Bharat 6G vision document that was released by PM in late 22. We've already put together a Bharat 6G alliance, which covers private sector companies, IITs, academicians, research people. They're working together, and in the ITU, the International Telecom Union, we've already put in a paper that has been accepted as one of the principles of 6G, and that is ubiquitous connectivity. Connectivity for all. That's already been accepted. We have a target of contributing 10% of the patents to 6G, of which, let me tell you, Navika, we are among the top 6 nations today in terms of contributing patents to 6G, as we sit today. We've put together the 6G testbed already. We've sanctioned close to 111 research projects costing about 300 crores. And we are well on our way in terms of putting in place a whole network of MOUs to work with 6G. Bharat 6G Alliance has tied up with America, Germany, Brazil, South Korea. The 6G Alliance is there to work together in tandem with them. And therefore, I'm extremely confident, the statement that I made, that we followed the world on 4G, we walked with the world in 5G, we will lead the world in 6G.
Mr. Scindia, the Prime Minister just met US President Trump. And one important project that's mentioned in the joint statement mentions India intends to invest in the maintenance, repair and financing of undersea cables in the Indian Ocean using trusted vendors. Could you elaborate on the significance of this initiative and the opportunities that it presents?
So, undersea cables are extremely important in terms of connectivity on a global scale. India has multiple landing stations for undersea cables. Those landing stations are manned mainly by the private sector, one or two government landing stations as well. But the biggest problem with undersea cables, as you will very well understand, Navika, and it's not analogous to India alone, but across the world, is really the maintenance of those undersea cables, because they snap all the time. Simple examples where draft levels are low, you don't have deep drafts, fishing nets that cut into cables, marine life that cuts into cables, and therefore repairing those undersea cables is not an easy task. It takes a lot of capex in terms of equipment, setting that up, and therefore maintenance of those undersea cables is also extremely important, and this is a step in that direction.
But we did this in the past. I remember from our times when I covered telecom, Vajpayee era, we had similar undersea cables with Singtel and from India to Singapore. How are those cables doing? And has that experience, taught us how to effectively manage this technology?
So it's not it's not rocket science in terms of undersea cables. What's happened over time is following Moore's law in terms of the number of chips that will reduce, that will increase the capacity of the resistor. Similarly, for undersea cables, the amount of information through that OFC that you can push through. So the same cable width can transmit exponentially greater amount of data bits into the system. And therefore, the large volume of data that comes in. And the key issue is separating domestic traffic from ILD traffic. So that's part one. Part two is that the undersea cables have become many more in number, because connectivity to Africa is separately, connectivity to the Middle East is separate, connectivity to Singapore is separate, connectivity to the rest of ASEAN is separate, and then off to to Europe and to the Americas. So the number of cables that are coming in, because the amount of data that's being consumed has also grown tremendously. And with our targets that we are looking at over Bharat 6G, when 6G technology becomes all-pervasive, is to ensure 100 Mbps per customer. We're today at 20 Mbps, so we're looking at a jump of 5. We were at 1.5 Mbps 10 years ago. So guaranteeing 100 Mbps per customer, making sure you're able to give 1 petabyte per gram panchayat. And so the amount of data that's going to be consumed is going to be exponentially larger. And so you'll have to have both on a domestic basis and an international basis. And for the international basis, you'll have to have many more undersea cables that are laid.
Mr. Scindia, let me also ask you. A question is often asked.
So for example, and even for the domestic side, so we've laid an undersea cable to connect to the Andamans. We've laid an undersea cable successfully to connect to Lakshadweep. Both have been close to about 1,000 crore projects that were inaugurated by the Prime Minister in late 23, early 24.
Let me also ask you about the fact that it's often said, and you face these questions in Parliament, on public sector undertakings under your ministry, BSNL. Many infusions of capital later, what is the status, and how would you justify government being in the core point of running the telecom sector through this PSU?
So I think that, so let me give you the backdrop. In the telecom sector globally, you have very few countries that have more than 2 national players. And we are very lucky in India to have 4 national players. One of them is BSNL. It's extremely important, I believe, from the social perspective as well, until you're able to connect every single village across this country with OFC and broadband and all of that to have that capability in a government provider. The government has infused close to about 3.04 lakh crores into BSNL. A lot of that had to do with legacy issues as well. For example, we had a VRS that was in place for almost about 50,000 crores. That also includes, the figure I gave you includes the spectrum that was given to BSNL, which is an accounting entry, because the capital infusion that comes in also goes out back to the CFI in terms of payment for that spectrum, which is almost 75,000 crores out of that 3 lakh crores. And then also part of BharatNet, which is our OFC venture, is part of that. But having said that, I am extremely glad to report to you and through you to all our esteemed members sitting here today and the millions that are watching on your channel, that for the first time in 17 years, and 17 years is a long time in economics, for the first time in 17 years after 2007, BSNL has made a net profit for the quarter of October to December. BSNL has not made a net profit for the last 17 years on any quarter. This quarter, December 31st, we closed at 262 crores to be exact net profit, number one. Number two, we've kept our expenses in check. Number three, we've made an operating profit since this capital infusion came in. From 2021, we made an operating profit. So for those of you who understand accounting, on an EBITDA basis, we've made an operating profit from 2021 onwards. 23-24, last year, we made an operating profit of 2,100 crores. This 9 months, so I'm taking 9 months, so if you do pro rata of that, 9 months, April to December, we made an operating profit of 2,400 crores. So in 9 months, we've made 10% more than for the full year of last year. And finally, our loss last year was close to 5,500 crores. As of Q3 FY 24-25, which ends quarter ending December 31st, our loss has been narrowed by close to 1,800 crores.
How did you crack the whip?
So we are turning it around.
How did you crack the whip?
I cracked no whip. Credit for this goes A, to the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, B, to every employee of my BSNL, who have worked tirelessly to ensure that we turn around the ship and make sure its value accretive to Bharat.
I think it's really pleasant news going out there that Bharat Sanchar Nigam Limited has turned the corner and has become profitable. And kudos to you and your government for doing so. Another passionate point with you is the development of the Northeast. How do you see Northeast as playing a crucial role in the road to Bharat, Viksit Bharat in 2047?
So just to give you a flavor of the Northeast, we have 4.5 crore population in 8 states in the Northeast. The most diverse, the most rich from an agrarian point of view, from a natural resource, including petroleum point of view, from a geographical point of view, and from a strategic locational point of view. On an economic backdrop, you've got 8 states that are growing for the last 5 to 7 years between 10 to 12% CAGR. So while the rest of India is growing at 6.5–7%, the Northeast states are growing between 10 to 12%. That talks and speaks to you about the economic opportunity that lies in the Northeast. The Northeast was always seen as an appendage of India. It is always seen as the last vantage point of India. The Prime Minister has turned that paradigm. and made the Northeast the first point of India, made the Northeast the most strategic initiative going forward for India. And therefore, our access into ASEAN, our access into the East is through the Northeast. And the capability for us to turn that into an international trading region is tremendous. And I'm working with all the 8 chief ministers as a partner, as a service provider, which is what my role is in donor, to make sure that for each particular state, we'll work on a comparative and competitive advantage basis. Michael Porter's theory of 5 forces, applying that to each state in the Northeast with every chief minister and his and her team, to make sure we understand what the core advantages of each state is and work on that. So just to give you an example, if you look at horticulture, floriculture, right? I didn't realize till I became Civil Aviation Minister that when I instituted Krishi Udan, which was really a subsidized logistical program to carry agrarian products in the belly of an aircraft, which have very low survival periods to make sure that you're able to transport them to other markets. My queen pineapples from Tripura were going where? They weren't going to Bombay. They weren't going to Bengaluru. Largest market is Germany. My king chilies from Nagaland, largest market, Dubai. Today, India imports its orchids from Thailand and God knows where all, right? Out of the 1,500 species of orchids in the world, 650 are grown in one state, Arunachal Pradesh alone. The capability of tourism is tremendous. What you and I use in our colognes, something called oud. That oud comes from agar wood. And that agar wood, apart from Indonesia, the biggest treasure house is Assam and Tripura. And I was not aware till I became donor minister that 1 ounce of agar wood is priced greater than silver and gold. For those 2 states alone, you're looking at an income stream greater than 15,000 crores per annum. Those are the potentials of that region. We have 2,000 kilometers of a border that we share with 6 countries in that region. Look at the trade capabilities that we can have there. We're already selling power to Bhutan, to Nepal, and all of that. But the immense amount of trade and commerce capabilities that we can do if we start having trading relationships across our borders. That can be our gateway to the global south. And the global south, which economically is going to rule the world in the days to come. And that's our vision, that's the Prime Minister's vision for the Northeast.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you, are you sure you export those chilies only to Dubai? Because I think...
Not only to Dubai, but that's one of the largest markets. The second largest market is Navika's home.
I thought it was the opposition's, party headquarters, because the opposition probably gets all those chilies and can find nothing right in what you do. They say you work only for one...
I'm going to hold off on that. I think the people of India have passed their judgment on the opposition. Not once, not twice, not thrice, but continually. And you've seen that happen in the recent Delhi election as well.
So you're saying saffron is the way to go? To counter green chilies?
Bharat is the way to go. And the Bharatiya Janata Party is powering Bharat under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi.
Well, since it's a business summit, I won't... doorstep you with too much of politics. But as always, it's a pleasure talking to you, and especially the way forward that you show us holds a lot of promise. We're looking forward to Bharat marching forward and being an economic superpower sooner than later.
Thank you very much, Navika. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia.
Well, spicy and full of fire.
Spicy and full of fun. Yes, absolutely, as ever. Mr. Scindia, Navika Kumar, thank you very much for that very enlightening discussion. Thank you indeed.